Hey guys, Jaybird here, and today we're going to be doing another tutorial. This one's going to be kind of more take it as a grain of salt sort of tutorial, but we're going to be going over Treyarch's gameplay standards. So these are going to be kind of guidelines as to the sizes of objects of what they should be in your map. So obviously this is relative to what you're making, but we're going to be going over a few things in this tutorial. The first thing I'm going to go over is the player size, so that you know what they're capable of going through for standing, crouching, and prone, as well as we're going to go over some of the actual, like this is going to be multiplayer and single player based, but the cover sizes for players, so that you know if they're sticking, like if they're crouched, are they capable of being hit in that crouched cover, as well as we're also going to be going over the building sizes, so that's going to include walls, doors, and windows and such like things like that. And then the last thing we're going to go over is going to be stairs. So these are very, very important things to keep track of for sizes in your map, so they don't look odd and they look somewhat realistic and also play well. Alright guys, let's jump in it. Alright guys, so I'm back in the test map. And what we're going to be kind of going over here, and you can see right now I have three sort of holes here. So you can see this player, or this default character, is basically just high enough to fit through this. So this is basically going to be our standard of what a player can make it through. So if you look at this, and I draw a brush out so you can see how big this hole is, it is 72 units high. So 72 units high is how big the player's bounding box is, or the player collision. So if you guys want to just kind of get an idea for the player, basically this player here, if I were to create a radius for instance and put it around the player, so let's try to line this up so you can actually get an idea of what's going on here. So I'm going to have this radius, you can see it's pretty big right now, but this is going to be showing off what the player's size will be. So if I go to the height, that is set to 72. So that's going to be as tall as the player is. And the radius is going to be 32. Actually, it'd be 16. 32 is the diameter. Sorry. So this is how the bounding box for a player collision with the world is. So if you're moving around and you're trying to think of how the player's collision works, even in script, the height is 72 and the radius is 16. So that's units, and the units represent, I believe, inches. So 1 unit represents 1 inch. So that's kind of an idea of what's going on with the player model itself. So 72 units high, you can have a wall, although typically if you're doing a door, you want it to have a bit bigger of a gap between the player's head and the door, or else it looks a bit weird. But this is, say you wanted to make like a cutout or something and the player just fits through, that's the bare minimum that you would require for the player to be able to walk through that. Now for crouching, it's going to be a lot shorter. It's going to be 52 units. So you can see here my little cutout is 52 units high. So this is for crouching. If you want to make it through the surface or the area and you're going to be crouching, then it's going to have to be 52 units high minimum. And then the last one's going to be for prone. So you can see here we are 32 units high. So if you want to be able to make it through an area for crawling, crouching and standing definitely won't be able to make it through this, so you got to crawl through in prone, 32 units minimum. So that's going to go over all the players' kind of collision with things. So it's pretty basic. Player collision is a cylinder. It's 32 units wide total, 16 units radius, 72 units high. So 72 units high in standing, 52 in crouch, and 32 in prone. Okay, so the next thing we're going to kind of go over is going to be the cover system for Black Ops 3, and actually this also applies to all other Call of Duties. So let's say for instance the player is standing up. Like we said, our player height is considered 72 units, so to completely block the player, block that collision, that radius collision that we were showing the cylinder, you would have to have a wall of 72 units high so that bullets going completely horizontal won't hit the player or AI. If you were to do, say, crouching, you would want to bring that down to 48. So I know we said 52 for the player collision to make it through, but for crouch, the bullets can't hit the player or AI if the wall is 48 units high. Obviously, you want to have at least the width of the player also covered horizontally, so 32 units dead center with the actual player. That is for a full crouch cover, so that is to completely protect the player or AI, so that way if they're in crouch you can't hit them if you're shooting directly horizontal at them. But there is a partial cover, which means only the head. So this is where people call head glitching in crouched would be. So this would be 36 units. So this is so that the head is popping out, but the body's completely submerged under the cover. Still 32 units wide, completely centered to the player, but 36 units high will prevent the player from being shot in the body or lower, but the head is exposed. And then finally, if you're in prone, you can have a 16 unit cover and it will cover the player completely horizontally. However, if I'm shooting from back here, I could still probably see your legs sticking out the back, so I would probably avoid using 16 unit cover. So that's going to cover. So we're actually just going to be moving on to world sizes for the actual game. So that's going to include standard wall sizes for exterior walls, interior walls. We're also going to go over some kind of gameplay standards for windows and doors, as well as the final thing was the stairs, which are very important in my opinion, because I think a lot of people mess those up. So for a wall, in my opinion, I like using 4 units thick or 8 units thick, depending on what I'm doing. In this scenario, we're going to be sticking with an 8 units thick wall. So I have my wall here. I can make it out as long as I want. That's not part of the gameplay standard. That's completely up to what you're making. But for this standard, 128 units represents how tall an outside wall should be. Obviously, that's for single story buildings. But if you were to do like a 2-story building, you probably want to have every story to be 128 units roughly. Remember, this is a standard. It's not a set in stone value, but it's kind of what Treyarch has used to make their maps. So what I'm going to do is cut this brush in half, just to kind of show you what the inside would be like. And I went over this cutting tutorial last day, so it should be all good for you guys. So we're at 128 units for the outside. So let's say this is the outside wall, and this is going to be the inside. We're going to want this to come down to 112. So 112 units represents how tall an interior room should be. And 128 is an exterior wall. So interior wall, exterior wall. And you'll notice, if I keep this as 8 units, I can drag out another wall here. And I can have my ceiling. The interesting thing though is if I have 8 units and 8 units, we kind of have a gap here. So the ceiling's actually going to be thicker than you think. So we have 112 units here for our interior wall. We can bring this down, and we have our ceiling. It might seem a bit low, but this is what the gameplay standard is. You can always adjust it yourself. Obviously, in the real world, ceiling heights differ by the area in the world that you're in. There's also rooms that could have vaulted ceilings. Really depends on what you're going for, but this is just a standard. So that kind of goes over how high a wall should be and whatnot. But let's say, for instance, we were doing our window tutorial from last day. We just kind of arbitrarily cut the window. I'm actually going to start off with the door first because we don't have to do any heights or anything, but we do have to focus on the actual width of the door. So a lot of times, the smallest door size, or actually standard door size, you're probably going to want to go with is going to be a total, like, remember 32 units is the bare minimum a player can fit through because they're box, although it'd probably be pretty difficult to fit through it. But a standard for a door would be 56 units wide. So it's a total of, what is this? 24 units beyond what the player's bounding box is. So we can go ahead and just stretch out our wall here. So that's going to be the total width of the door. Now you're also going to want to figure out what the height is. If you're using a door frame model, obviously base this size, the width, and the height off of the door frame model, but if you're doing this yourself with brushes, this is kind of like a rough estimate of what you should be doing for this. So a standard door size for height would be 96 units, and this has been the same standard since Call of Duty 4. They actually had this all written out and everything. You'll notice, however, my wall here, the exterior wall has to be cut to the same size as well. So I can go ahead and just select that, drag this up, and there we go. So we got a door, and that is at gameplay stems, and you can tell that looks like relatively the size of a door, and that looks pretty correct. However, this is a single door. We also have double doors, and they also have standards for door models as well provided for us. So for a let's say a door model, they actually go with a 54 unit wide door. So it's 2 units off of each side, but 1 unit off of the top, so it'd be 95. So basically 1 unit off of all sides except for the bottom. That's the standard for a door model. So usually if they provide a model, this is probably what the size of the door model would be. Just about 1 unit around the edge smaller. For double doors, however, we're going to be sticking back to our single door standard. For the height, at least, for the thickness, it's going to be not quite double this door size, but 110 units. So let's say we go ahead and drag all of this over. Wait, give me a second here. My door is here. Okay. And the inner part. I don't even know what this brush was from. Anyways, I'm just going to drag this out and match it up. So that way, what we can do is drag our door. Oh, that was our door is what it was. So I'm just going to do that again. I'll show you that we're still at 96 units high, but we're going to be doing 110 units wide. So I'll go ahead and select the outside walls again, and I'll drag that over to the 110 units high there. Don't forget to bring the frame over as well. And on the inside. So there we go. So this one is still 96 units high like the single door, but instead of being 56 units wide, it's 110 units wide. So that's going to be covering a door. Like I said, if your model is a different size than what the gameplay standard is, I would go with the model. Don't try scaling the model and whatnot. It's probably easier just to work around what the model size is. So the next thing, you're probably going to want to have your window set up. So this is really vague. So, and unlike a door can be relatively 2 sizes. It's rather a single door or a double door, you know. Maybe you have some sort of special door, but in all honesty, most of the times doors are relatively the same size. So a window, however, can be however long it wants, however tall it wants. So that's really up to you and up to if you're using models. But for the default gameplay standards, we're going to be going over what the maximum and minimum traversal windows are. So this is probably more useful for multiplayer, but we'll also be going over just the basic height for a window. So 32 units. That is going to be your basic height for how high the base here, also known as the sill, so the window sill, so this is this part here, this has to be 32 units high. So this will be your minimum height that you can hop over the object. or else it'll be too low, and the player they'll just probably just jump over it. For gameplay standards, what you're probably going to want to have is about a 64 unit high, basically window itself. The width, that can be relative. You can do whatever you want. They do have set in their standards here that the actual window width is 56 units. So you could go with that, but windows are really relative to what you're making. So the typical zombie windows probably stick with the 56 units, but you can go with whatever size window you want. The big issue is this 32 units here. Let's say, for instance, we're taking our zombie window. So I'm just going to bring over a copy of this window here over to our wall window that we were doing. So if I go back into, not game view, but we're going to go into just the lit view. So I'm hitting F9 to get out of game view, and I'm just going to hide the clips. And you'll notice this window size would have been good for multiplayer, and that was bare minimum height, but we're going to want to show this so that the window height is good for zombies. And you'll notice Treyarch provided us this traversal clip, and it's just as thick as our wall here, so 8 units wide, but it's also higher than our window. So zombie gameplay standards are actually a bit higher. So instead of 32 units, it's actually 40 units. And if you're moving this up, I would also move this one up as well. So that moved up about, 6 units? Something like that. But yeah, so basically, you have to keep in mind that zombie traversal size, so this is so that the animations of this line up properly. You want the zombie's hands to be actually grabbing onto the window itself. So you can use this traversal to line it up. And if you're doing my traversals tutorial as well, for gameplay standards, I provided traversal brushes. They don't show up in game. They're completely just for Radiant, so that you know how to line this stuff up. And that's what Treyarch provided us as well here, so that you can tell the zombie's gonna put his hands on here to hop over the wall. So that kind of goes over zombie-related windows. I can delete this now, but basically, the 32 units is the minimum for a player to jump over it, but 40 units is what it's required. It can't be any higher, it can't be any less for a window size for a zombie to hop over. Okay, so that kind of goes over the windows of things. The last thing I'm going to go over here is going to be staircases. So I'm not going to be going over anything too fancy here, but this is just going to be a basic staircase that I'm going to make out of brushes. So we're going to do this literally step by step. So the interesting thing is they've changed the standard since the last time they've done Call of Duty. From when they had their standards set up for World at War, the size used to be 8 long, 6 high. So that's, in basic construction terms, that's rise versus run. So rise being how high it goes up, run being how wide the step is. So you would basically just copy and paste and drag this over and create your stairs. However, in Black Ops 3, gameplay standards are slightly different. So this isn't the exact same as what World at War and COD 4 had. The gameplay standard for standard stairs would have a rise of 8 and a run of 12. And this would be a bit less steep of a staircase. So I'm just going to copy paste a few. And you can kind of get the idea. It's literally just this. If you don't want all this extra stuff underneath, you can always just drag the brushes down and have it kind of meet at the bottom. And there you go. But realistically, what you're trying to do is make sure that this kind of gap here between each step is always 8 and 12. 8 and 12. 8 and 12. So that it's completely the same. You don't want it varying, or else the stairs obviously weren't made correctly. But the width of your stairs are really relative to what you're making. So if you're just doing like a small staircase, keep in mind the player is 32 units wide. He would be able to walk up this and like with walls on the other side. But realistically, you're gonna want to have a staircase. I would say, if you're doing a small staircase, 80, don't go much smaller than this. This is Jay's Jaybird's gameplay standards here, not the actual ones. There's nothing really going on about the actual width of a staircase, but realistically, you're going to want at least 80 units. I'm at 112 here. It's really relative to what you're making. Maybe you have a really wide staircase with a railing going down the middle. Who knows? It's really up to what you're going to be doing. So that's going to be it for this tutorial, guys. We've gone over player collision sizes and whatnot. We've gone over doors, we went over windows, and we also went over staircases. I hope that helps you guys out with the fundamentals of mapping, and I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.